Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Alright, just want to make sure this comes up and we are live. So I think when I do segments like this, usually I have like a series of shows. I want to try to do them live. Live shows are more difficult. It's like you're overly aware of not trying to fuck up. You don't get the chance to, well, you still can be you. It doesn't matter. I was at work today and I was having a conversation with my team lead, and we're talking about the Charlottesville thing, and we're just kind of going back and forth. Both of us, for the most part, agreed. He's libertarian. If the groups that are going to protest, the fascist groups, the Nazis, and some of the groups are not even Nazis, some of them are just right-wingers. But at this point, the right-wingers are being classified as Nazis, even when they distance themselves from Nazis. But if you're going to have groups like ANTIFA, I think you're fighting the wrong enemy. 95% of this country disagrees with the KKK. And I understand that, you know, the anti-fascist thing may go beyond the KKK. I don't know what fascism means in the sense in the way that you mean it. I know the Mussolini definition, but I don't know it specifically in the way that you mean it. But two, I think you're fighting the wrong battles. Those guys in Charlottesville are irrelevant. The few people who showed up in that thing in Boston are irrelevant. Look at the number of people you've had to come out in response to those people. You're fighting the wrong enemy. There is a deeper enemy. You can call it a deep state of sorts. That's worse. That's far more apocalyptic than a bunch of racists that showed up in Charlottesville to protest the statue. I live in Richmond. I drive by these statues all the time. I don't care about the statues. Taking down Robert E. Lee is not going to get rid of Robert E. Lee. But there are issues that are pressing, that are a big fucking deal. The statues are not one of them. These are things that are tried to make like kind of got you points in a sense. They usually just stir up resentments. And if you notice, media has jumped from the Russian story as the wheels fell off that story onto the next fastest thing running, which was, oh my God, we have racists everywhere in the country, even though they're only 95%. 95% of people disagree with the KKK. And yes, I know that doesn't, the number of people who made, that stuff is relative to a certain degree, meaning perspectives. But if you went with this latitude of 0 being immensely lib and 10 being Nazi, well, yeah, there are going to be some people on the right that fall in that spot. I would wager, I would make the point that there's a larger enemy. And let me say it in this way, because, and this is a slight departure, but I'm trying to make a point. Back in slave culture, slave times, you had this kind of master-slave relationship. Now, whites were dirt poor also. Dirt poor. You only had a few people who had slaves, meaning a small percentage. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the whites who were there wanted to get rid of slavery. There was somebody at the bottom rung, meaning even though they were dirt poor, there was somebody lower on the economic scale, the status scale than them. How much cash you have, your job. It's not just about making ends meet. It's also to some degree a status symbol. That hasn't changed. That was the same back then. That being said, there's a paradox, or there's a contradiction in the behavior or in that relationship between a master and a slave. Usually when I find contradictions, I find those to be somewhat unsteady or unstable. I look at it as any action that produces a negative, how did I write this? Yeah, any action that produces a negative action, or that produces an action that's out of alignment with some kind of sustainability. And mind you, the sustainability is going to be within ranges. It's going to cause problems. That doesn't just interact with me in the environment itself. It's also with people. There are certain things that people need to be able to function and be whole. societal conditions, how people relate to one another in a society. Those things are also subject to that force, or to that, I would call it somewhat of a rule. All I mean is, an action has a consequence. That's probably the fastest way to put it. And it takes a while for that consequence, the momentum of it, to slow down. You have master-slave relationship. Contradiction. The master in this case pays for the slave to do, or gets the slave to do X. It's free labor. He can exploit the labor of the slave. He has all power and domain over that particular slave, turning a man into something less for his own ends. That being said, though, the slave is developing a skill. He's developing a skill. Meaning, at a certain point, the master doesn't have the capacity to replicate the skill that the slave has. The master has become dependent on the slave. Now, say this goes away. So now you have capitalism. Meaning, well, that was capitalism too, but you have this instance of it. Worker and boss. To replace slave and slave master. In this odd situation, though, it's not just worker and boss. It's also worker, boss, / consumer. / consumer. So now, once again, you have a capitalist. That capitalist has purchased the labor of someone. That person is doing a skill for that particular capitalist. That capitalist doesn't know how to do that skill. That capitalist doesn't even care about that skill. He gives two shits about the skill. What he cares about is the profit. Meaning, he doesn't know how to do it. The worker does. And in that worker knowing how to do it, that particular master or that particular boss is captured. They're intertwined with one another. It's not a situation of a power going one way. The power goes both ways. That's the only reason unions work. Otherwise, unions will have no force at all. The reason I say this is the perspective in the country, for the most part, always goes in one direction between boss and worker, with the idea of the boss or the management or the capitalist in this case having all the power. I'm saying that's not the case. There's a caveat. When you're living in a country that doesn't have any kind of globalization, meaning trade is not all across the world, and you don't have trade laws and everything else, the number of people you have in a particular country to work is limited. That means workers have more clout. They have more might. I can't get this labor pool from anywhere else. I have to deal with these particular workers. This is my labor pool. My business is in this particular fixed location. You can imagine that that would give a certain more oomph to the worker in that case. The manager, the boss, the capitalist can't get their capital. They can't reap their profits off the exploitation of labor if the labor doesn't actually work. Solidarity in this case is a strength. That's why unions are so feared, and that's why unions are so attacked. Unions are powerful entities. Those things assert the right of the worker in that sense. Now, the argument for this is that in the same way that the slave and the master, or the slave in this degree becomes the master from this perspective, the worker to this perspective comes the capitalist, or the master in this case. But this isn't necessarily true. Now, in the United States, the worker pool expanded. Once the worker pool expanded, those companies can move abroad, meaning they can put more pressure on these workers to capitulate, meaning in regards to negotiations. Hey, if you give me too hard of a time, I'm moving my factory over to China. Hell, I'm moving my factory over to China anyway because I can make more money. Yes, you fired those people, but yes, I'm making more profits. Trade, globalization, these trade deals, part of those trade deals, part of the purpose was to expand the labor pool. It essentially was able to decrease the amount of money that employers could pay for labor. That's why when you look at the amount people were making, real wages stay stagnant. My point is, the worker has two more advantages in this case that the slave didn't necessarily have. The worker is not necessarily attached. And I know this is chopping a lot of wood, but I'm making a point. He has to chop a lot of wood. I'm sorry, trying to make a point. The worker has two advantages. First, the capitalist, like I said, is dependent upon that labor, because the capitalist doesn't care what takes place in the business. He just wants to make the profit. Meaning, if the worker stops working, the capitalist can't make their profits. It's almost like saying God doesn't exist without a lesser thing to acknowledge that there's God. Well, in this case, if the worker doesn't work, there is no capitalist in the case. The second case is that it's not just that the worker works, it's also that the worker consumes, if that makes sense. It's a duality, meaning the worker is buying products. Now, it may not necessarily be his own product, but it's products that's out in the market that other workers have made. That purchasing of other products allows the capitalist to accrue profit, again, off the labor of the worker. If people stop buying, the capitalist stops making cash. Those are two advantages. Those are two significant advantages. The last one is government. Government, democracy, representative government, those things are problematic to capitalists. If you remember, in the conversation between Varney and Richard Wolff made the point that, well, people can come together, society can come together and make a change in regards to what it wants and how it wants to organize itself. Varney was like, you're trying to take my cash. And he says the government can come together and make a change to reorganize itself to something more equitable. Varney was aghast by that. He was aghast by that because he understood what Richard Wolff was saying. The government itself, the political apparatus, can be used by the masses. Because mind you, they are the masses. You're talking about 99% of the population that are in similar sandbox. But yeah, you're talking about 99% of the population in similar sandbox. So you can understand that a certain amount of solidarity completely changes this particular country. The statue it's not a big deal. Those Nazis going out there, I understand the impetus to go after. I get it. I totally get it. But it's just 500 or 400 or however many. You have a lot of other people in this country, and that would have went unnoticed. Nobody would have known that Charlottesville existed. Those people are going to die of irrelevance. Look, I don't want to go too far into it because I don't want this video to go too long, but the biggest difference between those two things, the master and the slave, well, it's not the biggest difference, but a key difference is the master in this case is unnecessary. Completely unnecessary. In the first case, the master and the slave relationship, that's true that the master becomes somewhat subordinate to the slave in the case of looking at it from the perspective of the master not having a skill set. But the slave can never become the master in that particular society. Wouldn't have been allowed. His skin would not have allowed him to do it. In our current society, that is not true. In our current society, that's not true. Meaning the worker / consumer can also be the manager or the boss. Workers themselves can own and control their own affairs. The capitalist is completely unnecessary in our particular political apparatus. If the masses understood that and reorganized society in a way that acknowledged that, you would have a different society. You would have transformed your society overnight. What you're talking about are worker co-ops. You're talking about worker co-ops. The problem, the thing that you need to confront, the thing that you really need to confront head on, that you need to hit like a hammer, is perspective. It's perspective. Not just for you, but for the most of the people to look at this. People don't look at this in this way. They look at themselves as silos. I'm saying they shouldn't look at themselves as siloed. They should look at the person who's standing beside them as economically in the same boat. The issue is not race, it's class. That's what I'm getting at. If you really are trying to go balls out to change how people interact or against fascism, deal with the economic situation in the country. Attack that situation balls out. Freedom. If you're talking about real freedom, you can't have freedom without economic freedom in a capitalistic society. Your decision space is governed by how much cash you have in your wallet. Where are you going to eat at? What clothes are you going to wear? What trips are you going to take, if you're going to take trips at all? Are you going to have money to pay for your kids' vacation? Are you going to have money to pay for your mom's drugs? Your decision space in a capitalistic society is completely determined by how much cash you have in your pocket. Going after a couple of Nazis is, I understand the impulse. I get it. Going after these guys to stop these guys from speaking, I understand the impulse. I get it. But you don't confront racism at the level of the races. You can't change that person's mind. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is have a standoff that gets you nowhere. Looking violent, looking aggressive, is not in your best interest. When Martin Luther King was marching, these guys would be marching in suits. They would be holding signs saying, "I am a man." They're being nonviolent. They're holding the moral high ground, the moral authority. There's not going to be any video of anybody hurting anyone. There's not going to be any video of anybody doing anything else other than saying, "I am a man." I'm making the argument to you that what you're looking for is a class rights movement, not the civil rights thing. Class rights. You still can hold that sign that says, "I'm a man." You still need to be nonviolent. People need to look at you and see that you yourself have the moral high ground in what you're saying. It's not, I kind of make this point that it's braver to take a hit as opposed to throw one. Particularly when you're dealing with something like these issues of class. You don't want to be painted as some violent terrorist organization seeking to overthrow the government. No, you're looking at this from the standpoint of our issue is class. An Occupy movement that's actually mobilized, that's actually organized into actually doing something. Those marches that you guys were having, those marches should have been had long before these Nazis. I'm just making this point that there are more dangerous situations in regards to these issues of class as opposed to these issues of race. Think of it from the standpoint of just automation by itself. Automation by itself. Most of the jobs are going to be eliminated. I understand fascism is bad, but most of the jobs are going to be eliminated. What takes place when most of those jobs are automated? Do you believe that the people who are engaged now, meaning the financial sector, do you honestly believe, or for that matter, the political sector, is going to do anything about it? They haven't said squat about it. Zero. The political apparatus doesn't change until that political apparatus is pushed to change. And there are certain issues that need to be brought to light, that need to be screamed at the top of your lungs, because that's going to be an issue. As one person after the next loses their jobs, as taxi workers loses their jobs, as convenience stores loses their jobs, fast food workers. I understand you're going after a bunch of races in Charlottesville. You understand people are struggling now. Right now. And their struggles is not necessarily from statues. Their struggles is from the economic system to which we face. They don't necessarily have to be under the lash and chain if they're in a job that they find absolutely miserable and despise it. A job that they may actually lose, putting them in a worst case scenario. I'm just making the point that the issue is class. The issue is class. If you're going to go after these guys, when there's an environmental protest, you should be there. When somebody gets shot by a cop, you should be there. Racial injustice, drug crimes injustice, one thing after the next. Your organization can't be siloed into this thing of specific fascists. Sometimes when people they deal with the world, they have to deal with the world in a way where, let me put it this way. When I was in India, and I was at a certain point in India, there's poverty, there's desperate poverty, at least when I was traveling, and it's one of those things where you turn yourself off. It's like you flip a switch, because you can't function dealing with the level of the angst that you get from it, to see human beings being in certain situations. You turn yourself off. I can't do anything about it. It's too big of a problem. I have no resources to fix this issue. It seems immense. It seems massive. It seems large. We pretend as if they're not vagaries going on already. Somebody get hauled to jail for having pot by an alcoholic policeman. Somebody being sentenced and put into a cage for doing a particular drug. Somebody being sentenced longer for doing a particular drug. That's pretty much the same thing, just because of their race. I'm just making this very specific point. And this isn't, I guess this is a slight criticism, but the criticism is only in a sense of anti-fascist is too narrow. And anti-fascist is not your issue. Your issue is capitalism. If you're going to deal, and look, Mussolini's definition is this merger between state and capital. That's what we have in this country. So you've picked a, yes, to some degree you can say a fascist government already. Look at the number of people we have in our cages. I'm just saying you need to be expanded. Not violently. You can't be violent. I'm sorry. Any level of violence is a problem. It's counterproductive. It's one of those things where it's a tactic that doesn't work. You want to have the moral high ground. When you're making a case, when you're stating your point, you want to have the moral high ground. Anything less is going to be a problem. You're going to be painted a particular way. You're already painted a particular way. I don't know if you were violent or not. Just making the point that if you're trying to actually affect real change, and I understand that the resources may not be vast and all this other stuff. I don't know how to organize people. I do a channel. But if you guys are trying to organize, and if you're trying to organize in a way that's changing something, to be somewhat of a movement, to put pressure on the political apparatus, A, you need to expand. And B, you need to be nonviolent. And C, you can't settle for just vulgar displays of racism. Yeah, you should show up in the case of somebody being violent, or in the case of somebody dealing with injustice. I'm just making a point that the injustices go across the board. You can't turn yourself off to everything else other than that very specific issue. That's all I'm saying. Oh, and the last point, this thing of turning yourself off. People in general, man, they turn themselves off to the world. They look at this stuff as, I can't do anything about it. This stuff is too big. It's like if you're in India, I can't give this person something because I end up giving everybody something. Problem is too big. I turn myself off. I close the window. I go away. Can't close the window. Can't go away. And what you're feeling, that pain, that angst, that connects you with each and every other person who's also dealing with shitty situations and feeling the same pain and angst. And at the very least, it gets you out of bed in the morning. Understand your intentions in going to Charlottesville. I understand your intentions in going into these guys and contesting these hate speeches, or as you call them, hate speeches. I get it. I totally get it. I don't blame you for it. I do think it's to some degree counterproductive if it comes across as violent, but I don't necessarily blame you for the impetus or the feeling of where it comes from. That being said, your issue is class. And if you're going to deal with this idea of fascists, expand the decision space of the people in your particular society. And I would guarantee you that the number of people who you would classify as fascists would go down. These things are environmental. These people aren't necessarily just bred in a factory. It's environmental. The worse society gets, the more you can get a demagogue going out saying that group is doing it. I can other that person. That's economic. That's environmental. There is nothing that you can do to change the ideology of that particular person. What you can do, meaning talking to them, what you can do, your option is to put pressure on politicians, to put pressure on issues, to create a movement of people, a people's movement, dealing with agricultural issues. That's across the board. A people's movement in that case. You can be relentless. You can be aggressive. But definitely be nonviolent. You can even be loud. Loud is not necessarily a bad thing. And I don't mean to repeat myself, but it's just one very specific point. And this, again, if it's a criticism, it's a mild one. It's just the issue is class, not race. And being very specific to this idea of fascism. Fascism is a sketchy definition that people have different definitions for, but contesting a few races in Charlottesville, we have 1,000 issues, 1,000 tragedies, 1,000 horrors. Even if you want to be specific to saying hate or whatever else, we have 1,000 of them a day. You could have been doing this before Charlottesville. That's all I'm saying. And it can expand to other things. Our issue is us. Meaning our perspective on things. How we look at our environment, how we look at our work. If something like Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, can break into the public consciousness, can something a little bit more aggressive, its older brother, its older spiteful brother, you never know. Like I said, nonviolence is the answer for it. Being violent is not going to get you anywhere. And look, I'm not accusing you of it. That's not what I mean. I'm just making this point that when you look back at those old pictures, there's a reason King was going with nonviolence. He was trying to break this image of African Americans that was in the media, the news, all these other places. No, I am a man. I'm a person. You're going to treat me with a certain level of dignity and respect. Do you honestly believe that the laws we have in this country with regards to how we treat people at the bottom scale of the economic ladder, the regulations, the rules, the things, the ways we allow corporations to influence our politics, you believe that shows respect for human life? And does it take it to be a specific fascist to garner your ill will? You have a larger task. That's all I'm saying. That is all I'm saying. Alright guys, I will leave it at that. Oh, let's see. Do we have commentary? Oh, apparently I'm funded by the Koch brothers. That's what I learned. That's what I learned. I read someone sent an article and it was like all these people. And then someone said also, he's also funded by the Koch brothers. I was like, holy shit. My wife was like, where's the cash? I was like, I have no idea. I have no idea where the cash is. Show me the money. And by the way, speaking of fascist ideas, I did a search for Antifa. I was looking for their specific website. It is scrubbed on Google. I don't even know if they have a website, but it seems a bit odd they wouldn't have a website. I could be wrong. When I did a search on Google, it did not show up. You could see people talking about them. I couldn't see anything about them themselves talking about themselves. I should check on Facebook. Rain. So, I don't know. I have to be honest. I don't know a huge amount about Antifa. I'm taking this kind of I'm taking their word for it in this sense, and not even their word for it. I'm thinking in the sense of Cornel West and some of those other religious leaders that went. And yeah, and I'm also thinking of Antifa. I'm thinking of this kind of combined thing of the left in opposition. Antifa is probably the more militant aspect of it, but I don't know if they're lefties. I don't know what they are. I just assume that they're anti-fascists. But you're right. You're right. I'm conflating in a sense. I'm assuming just because they're anti-fascists, they're lefties. That's right. That's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true. So this is my point. When I'm saying this, in the sense of the master-slave relationship, the worker-boss relationship, automation is coming. Whether we want it or not, it's technical innovation. Of course it's going to come. We're going to get better at things as time goes on. that automation is going to put a lot of people out of work. That automation should put a lot of people out of work. It should. This is one of those things where the problem of the society yields the solution. We have a finite planet. We're burning through resources left and right. You have a laptop that falls apart within 2 years. Do you really believe that your laptop needs to fall apart in 2 years? It doesn't. It has more to do with making sure that somebody else is going to have that particular job when that particular laptop falls apart. We're burning the resources of the planet. How much money are we spending on weapons? And just think, that's what I'm saying. 90% of those jobs, those repetitive jobs, are going to be done by robots. Now, why do you think they're talking this much about the universal basic income? The second aspect of this has to do with this idea of, look, I kind of botched this, but the capitalists are trying to get rid of those two issues. So the first issue has to do with the master versus, the capitalist versus the worker. The capitalist not necessarily knowing how to do what the worker does. Well, he wouldn't have to if he puts in a robot. It would do it automatically. But understand, this is a robot that's owned privately, not publicly, meaning the profits that are accrued from that particular robot are exclusive to the company and the capitalists, minus whatever they're paying in taxes. That's not benefiting society at all. He's going to do what he needs to do to accrue more profit. Firing those workers allows him to accrue more. This is kind of what I'm saying. This is a ticking time bomb in your society. Part of the reason why the universal basic income is getting this noise right now is because I think they understand that we're going to get to a point where there's not enough people to keep it going. That the people at the bottom don't have enough to keep it going. It's falling apart. I'm saying this is somewhat craven. I'm going to give you a stipend to live off. We're still going to make more profits. We're going to give you enough to just buy the stuff. Yes, we're going to be firing workers left and right because you guys are going to be technologically unemployed. Yes, we're going to be accruing more profit. And yes, we're going to give a tiny bit back as a UBI. Yes, I'm cynical about it. As long as those things remain private, it doesn't necessarily benefit the whole. The society itself needs to be reorganized. Needs to be rearranged. If Antifa wants to help, that's where you push. You push on the political apparatus to essentially, it's class rights. That's the point, it's class rights. Cardinal, neither Antifa nor white nationalist groups are in service of ideology. They are on the leash and under control of political interests and intel agencies. I don't know that. I would agree with you that this thing of like maybe white nationalists or something like that might have evaded like cops or other, like you said, intelligence organizations. But this is America, of course. You throw a rock, you have some random guy who's in an intelligence organization. Is there, just by probability, is there going to be a percentage of people in there who's racist? Yes, a percentage of the society who's racist. I don't know if there's a higher degree, but I'm not shocked by it. Whether they're pawns, I don't know. The problem with having a government that lies constantly, having media that lies or gets it wrong constantly, is this questioning of reality. What's real? What's real? Oftentimes we're having arguments over reality. Libertarians will have their slant on what they think history was, and ergo create their reality around it. Progressives do the same thing to some degree. Democrats do the same thing. As a society, we've been disillusioned by the failures of our elites, in a sense, either the political class or the media class. And I'm saying that's pretty profound. It's profound because for the first time that I've noticed, people have like no faith in it. Like it's one of those things where it's like everything is undermined, or the belief in everything is undermined, because there's always a potential alternative motive. Now, you live in a capitalistic society, meaning yes, there's an alternative motive to everything. To everything. You walk into a place, a hostess says, "Hey, welcome to so-and-so. How are you doing today?" "I'm doing fine." Did she ask you how you were doing today because she was a hostess and she was paid to do so? Did she open the door because she was paid to do so? Is your waitress being nice to you because she's paid to do so? Think about any particular person that you know in any particular business that you know and ask that same question. It creates distrust. It breeds distrust. It keeps you at each other's throats. This is part of your economic system. The more stress that you're going to put on a society, the more aberrant behavior you're going to get. Meaning you're going to get people who are behaving in weird fucking ways and who are blaming other people for things that are going on in their particular society, the vagaries of their society. A lot of that, some of that, yes, is them. But no one was raised a Nazi. No one was raised a white supremacist. Those things were, for the most part, edifices of the environments, or I should say, attributes of the environment. At least that's my thought. Gabriel Vincent Moon, there are real grievances on both the left and the right, but they're not each other's enemies. No, they're not. Some of this stuff is tribal. Look, if you're a progressive, you would agree with almost 40% of libertarianism. Meaning, if the Republican Party today was libertarians, and if you were progressives in office, at the very least, if you were being honest and you weren't necessarily trying to hedge and play politics or anything else, you would be able to get a lot of shit done. Right now, the way the left and the right are aligned, there is overlap. Not just that, there's overlap in regards to the rest of the nation. Many of the issues that we're talking about as progressive issues, there's high demand for it. I mean, if you're talking about single-payer healthcare, free college, strengthening Social Security and Medicare, increasing the minimum wage, those things pull more than 50%. So why no action? Why does the media deem it impossible? Have you thought about that? Why does the media deem it impossible? Why do politicians abhor it, run away from it, particularly Democrats? Why on earth are we talking about races everywhere now? Beforehand, for the last 8 months, it was Russia, but now it's races. You don't think that's kind of peculiar? The things that we deal with, or the things that we need to actually deal with in our daily lives, meaning how do we make our lives better? How do we make our lives easier? Don't come up. They don't come up. Those things are immensely popular. They don't come up. There's no in-depth story on the number of murders that has been taking place, that meaning the United States Army or the United States military, or for that matter, the CIA. Doesn't come up. It doesn't come up. The public doesn't care. I don't know if it's that the public doesn't care. The public looks at it as if I can't do anything about it, so no point investing myself. Again, man, roll down the window. Our issue is perspective. That's all. Our issue is one of perspective. The moment that the perspective changes, all of this changes. This edifice is not as powerful as it seems. It only seems powerful because people have the perspective that it's a powerful edifice. It's like power is where power is believed to reside. There's no there. Masses of people making a difference to do something else changes things. Completely changes things. Yeah. Chuck E. Cheese, when the actual Antifa fought the Nazis, the people voted to give Hitler as much power as possible to stop them and stop the chaos. If I'm not mistaken, that was burning out of Rhinestone. They made him it was, yeah, they were violent thugs. That's true. I mean, they were violent thugs. And yeah, there was the Antifa, if I'm not mistaken, in Italy and Germany. This see Lizzie, Chuck, this is in the 30s, and angry white male thing is getting thing. I don't know what she means by that one. I think she's trying to say that, look, people keep comparing this to Hitler. It's like, just because you say Nazi, that you're all of a sudden talking about Adolf Hitler. Yes, Hitler had the Nazi party. Is the white supremacy so powerful and so on the rise in the vulgar form of actual Nazis? No. The answer is no. Not in the vulgar form that they're talking about. No. 95% of the country disagrees with them. And look, you may say a large percentage of that may answer that question in a way that's dishonest, because they don't necessarily want to be categorized in a particular way. Fair enough. I don't believe the majority of the country agrees with the KKK. I just don't. I'm sorry. Now, is there a share that may harbor some views that are, let's say, pretty acerbic towards minorities? Yes. Yes. Yes, of course, there's going to be a larger percentage. But most, no. I don't believe it's on the rise. If for me to feel like it needs to be addressed, it needs to be a little bit more present. I don't trust the mainstream media's narrative generating factory. Because understand, nothing is fundamentally taking place in the country. You had a bunch of people who were in a country of 325 million. Those people decided to get together and assert their First Amendment rights. Now, if they're to themselves, left to their own devices in Charlottesville, and nobody comes to Charlottesville, guess what? We wouldn't be talking about Charlottesville. We wouldn't be talking about Charlottesville. Tactically, feeling that you need to engage your enemy at each and every point is a flaw. It's a wrong strategy. If we're playing chess and my opponent is dicking around on the side of the board, I'm ignoring my opponent because I think he's wasting time. They can go out and they can protest. It only bothers me when it gets to a point where I think there's some legitimacy to it. And no, I don't think they're legitimate. I think they're going to die of old age and they're going to fade away. The aspects that you could deal with are the economic aspects. There's nothing that you could do to change that person's mind that's a Nazi. That person is going to learn and grow through experience, not you telling him about it. Nothing that the government is going to do in this case is going to change the number of Nazis in the country other than changing the economic situation. That Nazi is not born. That Nazi is created. The Nazi is created. It's not just this person has a certain personality that allows a certain quirk. No, that person is bumping into things throughout the course of his life. He's bumping into certain people, certain family members. He understands that he has a certain history in this country. He has a certain heritage. This country has a certain complex history with regards to race. He may identify with a particular side. He may have been brought up in a particular way. However, this country created him. He wasn't born that way. He was created. The only way, the only chance that you have of doing anything about preventing that to taking place is economics. The only chance that you have to free people from having to deal with that guy is economics. Meaning, if people have economic freedom, they can assert that freedom by not necessarily having to live or deal with that particular guy. Fact is, if you're living in a free society, say you're living in a free society, you're in a liberal society, people are still free to be racist. Those people are still free to congregate. And yes, other people are free to protest. I would argue the question becomes, is that protest necessary? Is it strategically right, meaning cost-benefit analysis? What are you going to get out of it? And is it even necessary? Is it even necessary? I know from a hot standpoint, it feels like, oh man, you got to do something. But a lot of these things that we seem to interact with are just statements. There's no there to it. It's statements. It's like It's like we want to take down the sign or take down the statue because, you know, this guy was a horrible person. He was a terrorist that tried to overthrow the United States government. But the statue had been there for God knows how long. Oh, we want to take it down. Well, yeah, that looks like a statement. It looks like a line is being drawn. You're trying to do something that's besmirching my heritage. Why are you doing that? It's like people are investing certain things. They're investing themselves into these material things on both sides. On both sides. I've driven by those statues and have not given two shits about those statues. What I do care about is whether or not my mom can buy her meds, whether or not her social security is going to get increased, whether or not people are going to, my cousin or my godson is going to have $50,000 of debt when he gets out of college. Those are the things I care about. Whether you realize it or not, the poverty that's stricken with in regards to African Americans is far more intense than whites. And I don't mean to bring race into it, but there's a disparity between those things that needs to be brought up. The amount of blacks that are put in prison is much higher than whites. The number of stops. Mind you, we only make up 13% of the country. And what I'm talking about percentages. These vulgar displays of racism are just that, vulgar displays. I'm talking about the things that go on persistently. Persistently. How many times is somebody going to get stopped just because of the color of their skin? Whether that's in New York, where they had like 70 or 80% of the people stopped were black. We only make up 13% of this population in this country. I understand it's showy. I get it. But come on, man. Surely you understand that the path to dealing with a lot of this stuff is through an economic window that better allows you to deal with the politics of it. And when I say economics, I'm not, again, not just talking about specific to economics. I'm just saying changing a person. How do I change this person? I can't change this person at the level of the races. I can't tell him anything. I'm back. Apparently it's going on and off. I just feel this stuff, this talk, all of this stuff that's been going on in regards to neo-Nazis, they hauled ass from the Russian narrative once that Russian narrative fell apart. Hauled ass from it. And immediately jumped to this thing of, oh my God, racists are going to eat your babies. They're going to eat your babies. Had your wife and children that are racist everywhere. Some people were shocked by this. Like even Trump's response. Some people were shocked by his response. Like, oh, Donald Trump's racist. I think Donald Trump is racist. Are you shitting? It's like, are you shitting me? I'm amazed at people's latitude sometimes of speech and giving the benefit of the doubt. I get hit sometimes from people on my left for giving the benefit of the doubt. But come on, man. When you start a campaign saying that Mexicans are rapists and criminals, and you think some of them are nice, that's an amazing fucking statement to start off your campaign with. That kind of gives this idea of where that person's head is. Yeah, that's right. James, why? Why is it about money? We should be about survival at this point. Why are we wasting our time when it's, dying before our eyes? You know, the eclipse, the solar eclipse tonight, one of the amazing things about it, I was kind of making this point that it's a real thing. It gets to this context that, look, there are things that are happening out there that go beyond what we ourselves are doing here. Meaning, we can get hit by an asteroid anytime. We're dicking around with resources, building bombs to murder each other. We're vulnerable as a planet. We're vulnerable ecologically, meaning the things that we've been doing around the planet to get energy. So that's the first point. We're vulnerable socially to things we've been doing to one another, meaning not allowing people to have their needs met and being okay with a certain aberrant behavior. We have a terrifying culture. We have an amazingly terrifying culture. People don't see it that way just because they're invested into it. They just function in it. But we allow people to starve, to go hungry, to sleep on the street. It's just an amazing thing. That's all. We have other people with billions of dollars and other people with squat. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Yeah, there's a moon. That moon is doing something that we don't necessarily see all the time. And it's this moment of, holy shit, that's taking place. There's something out there that's taking place. That's a larger reality. We're not a part of that larger reality. Most of the time, we eat our Cheerios, play our Xbox, watch our TV, go to work. That's our day. We rinse and repeat. Uncaring of larger issues. Not paying attention to the larger issues. Getting invested in petty dramas. If nothing else, that eclipse is, holy shit, that's a real thing. That's something out there. The sun is, what, 93 million miles away? 1 astronomical unit? I don't know how far the moon is away, but that's something that doesn't typically take place. Okay, well, now I'm going back to work. Pay no mind to the amazing thing that just took place. Marlon, there's nothing that can be done about an asteroid, so don't worry about it. That's not true. It depends on when they find it. Like, so say for instance you had a really large asteroid, a big fucking asteroid. Or say it wasn't that big. Let's say it was big enough where it would kill a lot of people and NASA comes across it. Let's say a petty astronomer comes across it. And what does say petty? I just mean not a big name astronomer. He's just a home astronomer, just looking up in space. And he says, holy shit, that looked like it's heading for us. He contacts NASA. NASA builds a ship to meet it and fly around it. Now, as it's flying around it, if I'm not mistaken, the gravity of that particular craft may be enough to give a permutation in how that thing is flying. Meaning, you may only need to get it 1 or 2 degrees away off for it to miss Earth, depending on how far out you find it. If you find it, it's like, oh, holy shit, this is going to hit us in 2 days. And yes, you're right. You're screwed. If you find it where you're years off, yeah, you have options. You have options. The truth from my perspective. I believe it's a setup switching from Russia to race statues. Consider all the true news not reported while the media incites war amongst the citizens. Yes, that's my point. That's my point. I did a video earlier. The media jumping from one story to the next to pretend that the Russia thing didn't take place. I agree. Luca Clemente, the video of Antifa standing on the hillside in Boston holding up clubs ready for battle are embarrassing. How can you claim to be for peace when bringing weapons for a protest? Agreed. Agreed. Absolutely agree. That's my point. It has to be nonviolent. Has to be. Not to mention, you understand that you can end up in a situation where one group continuously does those rallies just to provoke a reaction from another group. Just to have this kind of little gang war going on. It doesn't matter if you're morally superior, if you're continuously doing, you know, in these fighting situations of causing violence. A person died, man. And I'm not necessarily blaming Antifa for it. Yes, the person, it was a terror. Somebody murdered her. I'm not going to call this a terrorist attack. It was murder. Going to something like that with this idea that you're going to live out these battles. Because these guys were carrying Confederate flags with swords and shields, or clubs and shields, and out there battling back and forth as if they were fighting for the Confederacy. I don't want them living out their fantasies of fighting for the South. I don't want them living out their fantasies of, in their head, this is what the world is like, the oppression of the white man by the masses. I don't want them to be able to fight that out. I want them to go with irrelevance, that the society doesn't care, that it doesn't care. Well, at the very least, for as long as they harbor those views. The truth of it is that Antifa and those people are probably in the same economic boat. And the people who are part of Antifa and those people who are part of those Klansmen and all those other people economically are united, or should be united. They're divided based on this thing of race. I want to make the point that the issue is class. And having these issues of class, you're talking about environmental, of the gambit of left issues. I'm saying if you're going to be real, you need to engage in all those issues, not just one. We need to stop being siloed. I haven't seen Salvation. Bob Ramirez. I guess nobody's been watching Salvation about an asteroid coming. I haven't seen it. You know, the asteroid exploded over Russia. It was an amazing sight. Literally burst into the atmosphere, exploded, took out buildings, or took out a few windows or whatever, took out cars. It was an amazing sight to see. You know, we have this image that, you know, these guys know what's in the sky. These guys don't know what's in the sky. The amount of sky that we cover is a fraction. We are absolutely vulnerable. We have no clue what's out there. We have no clue. There's an asteroid that's going to be near us soon. But the majority of space, we have no clue. We have no clue. Gardner, white man simply experiences less oppression. Intrusive, we're all oppressed. That's why I keep making the point that the issue is class, not race. Even back during slavery, whites might have had a penny more than blacks. They might have had a penny more than blacks. What was there was status. That's the difference. It was status. It was this thing of, well, at least I'm not them. I might not have a dime to my name. I might not be educated. I might not know squat about the world, but at least I am not them. I'm not on the lower part of the ladder. A penny more in your pocket is nothing to crow about. Yes, you're given a certain amount of latitude because of your skin, but a penny more in your pocket is nothing more to crow about. You're in a capitalistic system. Your range of freedom is determined by how much cash you have in your pocket. If you have a penny more in your pocket, you have a penny more decision space. I don't know how much more of a decision space that is. Your issue is class, not race. Our political system is designed to divide us, not bring us together. Mike Cavallero. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's antagonistic by, it's conflict driven by design. Republicans and Democrats, they're at each other's throats. They find ways to keep out other people, meaning opposition. They find ways to create advantages over their opponent. It's all based on conflict. You have two people trying to destroy each other. The moment that the greater narrative falls out of favor, your government is going to implode. The parties themselves at that point become purely individualistic, and they don't necessarily care about the political apparatus or the country. It just needs to be this arms race. Who's first gonna say, fuck the country, I want to be in charge? That's gonna force the other party to do the same. Well, that's too strong. It's not gonna force the other party, but there's an incentive for the parties to continuously try to brinksmanship. I need control. I need power. What do I need to do to get that control and that power? Does that mean screwing over the government to get control and power? Then it has nothing to do with governance. It has to do about power. That's right, Jenna Lynn. It's best on competing with your neighbor, not working with your neighbor. Unite and change the system using the system. Jelly donut. Yes. That requires a change of perspective. That's my point. It's a change of perspective. It's all of these people looking around and saying, oh, right, we're the same. Yes, we're workers. We may in slightly different tasks, but ultimately we're the same. They're using us for their profits, but they need us for their profits. We don't need them. There's a difference in those things. The moment they've realized that, it becomes, we need to change the political apparatus to allow workers to run their own business, their own affairs. You allow workers to control the resources. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you just rip resources away from people, but it doesn't mean you reorganize your society in a way that says these things are going to be worker co-ops, not necessarily private interests of the individual. And look, there are problems with worker co-ops. That's just one step. I'd go further. I'd go a hell of a lot further. Yeah, I'd go further. We should boot them out. Venus Project. It deserves a fair hearing. It really does. Jacques Fresco's idea is amazing. I have questions about that idea. Meaning, how do you, it's a cashless environment, cashless society. How do you get people to do heinous labor? Because it's one thing to say that, well, we're going to have machines to do it all, but machines can't do each and every job. Maybe at some point, but not each and every job. How do you get heinous labor? In my mind, you need some compulsion in the society. That compulsion has nothing to do with that person's physical needs. It has to do with some kind of incentive based on the society itself. I don't know what that is. Yes, you can raise people up, like kind of like military service, where people do military service believing, unfortunately, that they're doing something good or they're being patriotic. You're not being patriotic, dude. I understand you feel that, but ultimately your government is using you to go and murder or die for their own ends. It has nothing to do with what's best for the country. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to break that to you. Doesn't necessarily mean that your intentions weren't good, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Murdering people. If what you're doing is murdering people, you're not doing it for the best reasons. Yeah, how do you get people to do heinous labor? Like the military service, you're getting people to die and kill. They're not getting much for it. What are they doing it for? They're doing it because they believe there's patriotic reasons, that they were brought up to believe that this was for the benefit of the whole. I'm saying society can also be arranged in the way of saying this is for the benefit of the whole. There are going to be certain jobs that are required. So yeah, doctors, architects, software engineers, those jobs are still going to need to exist. Those people are still going to need to work. The question becomes, if all of your needs are met, what would you do? You're going to have a lot of people who are going to go back to school. You're going to have a lot of people who do jobs that they never thought they could because they didn't necessarily want to take all those loans and all the stuff, other stuff on. They didn't have the opportunity. What do you do when all your needs are met? There are no fry cooks in that society. It's a fascinating idea. Think through it. Meaning, think through what your society looks like if there's no cash in it. It's a fascinating thing through when you're sitting there thinking through how each thing would work. But again, you kind of, there are going to be certain jobs that are just going to be heinous. How do you get people to do those jobs? I guess you would look at it as some kind of community service, and people instill these values of community service in the same way they instill values of military. That part, I lose the thread. I would love to talk to somebody in the Venus Project who can answer that. Robots already fight our wars. We already have flying killer drones. Alright guys, it's been an hour. I'm getting tired. You guys have a good night. I appreciate you guys logging on. This was random. I just wanted to do this particular story, and I didn't do the story well because I should have practiced it. There were very many pieces to it. I may tidy this up and do a separate video later and upload. But I'm going to leave it at that. Alright guys, have a good night. Bye-bye. Oh, 8:31, that's my birthday. I'm ending on my birthday. Thanks guys.